guys. Welcome to Life of Love. I'm so pleased to have you here today. We have a special guest, Kevin Palmieri. He's the CFO of Next Level University and the author of a global top 10 podcast and producer. He has so many listens and so many countries follow him. And I'm just so excited to have him as a guest here today. Thanks for being on, Kevin.
Of course, Julie. I'm so excited to chat. We had a wonderful little conversation behind the scenes, so I'm sure we're going to have a wonderful conversation in front of everybody else today.
I know. It was just such a great, connection. And I adore your message. Can't wait for my listeners to hear what you have to say about Next Level University and your mission. And, we're all about living a life of magic. I just wanted you to just share how you got started with Next Level University, just a quick insight so my listeners can know your background a little bit and what grews you.
Yeah, it's interesting. It never was planned. I never planned on being a podcaster or a speaker or an entrepreneur. That was never any of my goals. But in my mid-20s, so when I was 26 years old, I was working as a foreman for a weatherization company. All that means is we would go into buildings and make them more energy efficient. That was my job in a nutshell. That year, I ended up making $100,000. And I remember when I opened my final pay stub of the year, I expected that I would be the most confident version. I would have the most self-love. I'd have the most belief. My self-worth would be super high. And when I opened my final pay stub and I saw $100,000, nothing inside of me changed. I expected all this external stuff to fix my internal stuff, the voids I had, the fears, the insecurities, and that didn't happen. So I realized that for that year, I had lived unconsciously. I was just kind of going through the motions, hoping everything was going to work out. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast called Hyperconscious. The Hyperconscious podcast that's where all of this started for me. And then we ended up rebranding the podcast later. But yeah, that's where it started. I wanted to help people avoid the mistakes that I had made. And I really have a deep belief that awareness is one of the biggest bottlenecks for people. If you're not aware of why you're thinking the way you're thinking, why you're getting the results you're getting, it's very hard to take new action and create new opportunities and create new results without raising your awareness first. So that was it.
Oh my gosh. So I'm just picturing you opening up your paycheck and it's like this magic ticket and you're like ripping it open and you're like, You got the the opposite of the magic ticket. You're like, that's a huge visual for me. And then what do you think? I mean, it was just such a letdown that you're like, I'm still the same. Yeah.
It was. I really think that I knew. My awareness was high enough to know that I wasn't really happy. I won't say I wasn't happy because happiness is momentary. So I had a nice car. I was in really good shape. I was dating. So it's not that I was unhappy. I was unfulfilled. I was unaligned. I didn't have purpose. I didn't feel like I had a mission. I didn't feel like I was passionate. When I opened that paycheck, I thought, everything is going to fix itself now. I'm going to feel all these feelings that I don't feel yet. And I think that what happened for me, Julie, is I kept looking for keys. So if I have this car, that'll fill the void. That didn't work. If I have this girlfriend, that'll fill the void. That didn't work. If I'm dating a bunch of people at once, maybe that'll fill. That didn't work. And I think I said to myself, this is the key. This is the key that I've never had, that if I have this key, everything will get fixed. And I think in that moment, I realized, okay, I just worked my face off for the last year for this key, and this key didn't do it. Maybe I'm trying to open the wrong lock, or maybe I'm just taking the wrong approach. And it was a lot of awareness at once, but it helped me start a business about awareness. So in retrospect, it was the best thing that ever happened.
Right. You stopped being a zombie,
Yeah.
Wow, that took a lot of bravery to just shift gears like that. I'm just curious, were your parents into being aware, or they just sort of I don't know, sometimes parents can be good examples, or sometimes they're the opposite of what you end up doing. I was just curious about your childhood, if that sort of shook you.
I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. And no, it definitely, I didn't get inspired to become aware based on any of my family. My family's very supportive and they're very loving and they're very kind, but they're not trying to do what I'm trying to do in terms of having the impact and just being out there and showing up every day. And that's not, nothing against them. That's not for everybody. So no, for me, I think it was the understanding that I am more successful than I've ever been, but I don't feel it. Something was missing. I just knew something was missing. And I think the other part too is I think for a long time, I was thinking from a place of philosophy, not real philosophy, but I was always asking myself like the deeper questions. Like, why is that the way it is? And does that have to be the way it is? Or is that just the way it is right now because I'm doing it that way? So I think I've always had that itch that I wanted to scratch. I either never knew how, I didn't have the vehicle to do it, I was embarrassed to do it, I thought I'd be judged for it. So I think I've always had that to some degree. It never seemed worth it to pursue until I ended up miserable. And I was like, all right, this is the next logical step here. I mean, I tried everything else. Maybe this will work.
Right. They always say, oh, you just reach for your dreams, work hard, and we have these templates, right? Like go to school and get good grades. And, like you said, you had checked all the boxes and, life isn't a template. And so that's a really, I know I can relate because I got my master's degree. I did everything. I had a happy marriage, like 2 kids. And I just felt like I wasn't living in my joy. I felt like there had to be something else. And like you, I started questioning. I started being curious about, who am I? I always say, who am I to say I want more? I have everything. I have a full stomach, a roof over my head. And, it's like, am I being indulgent? And I think this segues into something that we decided we want to talk about is that self-worth, you deserve to be joyful. Can you share about what your insights are lately about self-worth and what that means to you? I mean, I know it's a moving target, right? I mean, we always have these hurdles, these things that come up and you're like, oh, I never thought about it that way, but it does, it shifts your paradigm. It shifts your outlook. So if any insight, we always talk about low self-esteem.
I know we talked about this behind the scenes. I originally thought that if you had high self-belief, so self-belief is your own belief in your capability to accomplish something. That's probably the easiest way to put it. I believe that I can start a podcast and it will be successful. Cool. You probably have above average self-belief. I thought if you had high self-belief, you were good. You were off to the races. Everything else is gravy. As we got, and full disclosure, I did not start this journey with self-belief. So I was low on self-belief and I was low on self-worth. I just didn't realize that. So a few years into the journey, we started understanding our listeners. And you might look at me as a tattooed bodybuilder and assume that our listener base is probably a masculine energy, maybe mostly male. It's actually the opposite. Most of our listeners are female. And that helped me understand why are most of our listeners female. Doesn't make any sense. I never would have expected to attract that sort of audience. Oh, then we started talking to the audience and realized there is this common wound of low self-worth. Almost every person I've ever talked to from our community had below the level that they should self-worth. They were inaccurate in their own understanding of their own self-worth. So that helped me understand that, oh, you know what? I have low self-worth too. And here's how I know. Number one, you find yourself appeasing. You're doing things for other people rather than doing something for yourself because you assume their judgment on you is more valuable than your judgment on yourself. That's one. Number two, your ability to put up and hold up your boundaries is a challenge. One of the reasons why is a lot of us don't have high enough self-worth to keep up our boundaries. The third thing is a lot of people are breaking promises to themselves repeatedly. And if you're breaking small promises yourself over and over and over and over, you're proving to yourself that you actually don't think you're worth it enough to show up for yourself. So that's something that we've seen so often. And now it makes sense to me why a lot of people are struggling to accomplish their goals, because there's a lot of people out there with high self-belief that are saying, do this. This is how you get more sales. This is how you make more money. This is how you improve your relationship. When for so many of us, the reason we're not succeeding at the level we want is the internal stuff. It's more of the internal stuff than the external stuff, because the internal stuff controls the external stuff. So yeah, that's one thing I've really started to understand at a deep level. And this is really I think the ultimate thought. I don't think anybody is truly accurate with their self-worth. I think you're either delusionally low or delusionally high. And all I mean by delusionally high is, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but the type of person who thinks they deserve success regardless of what they do. No matter what, I should be successful. I deserve to be successful because I am very valuable. I do not disagree that you are intrinsically valuable, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should have a high level of success, because you might be over in your own understanding and awareness of your value. So I think it's with that, with everything, Julie. I think that most people are either over or under on self-belief. They just don't know it. We call it a drive to 5. The drive to 5 is you are humble but confident. The drive to 5 is you understand that you are valuable as a human being, but you also understand that you could become more valuable as a human being, and your self-worth will reflect that. So yeah, that's kind of the longest version of self-worth and self-belief in a nutshell.
What resonated in me is that if you're rating your success on the external, if your success is based on someone else telling you're successful, then it's a slippery slope. So I guess that the whole, and I hear you. And the thing is that this whole idea of success, to me, it's like, well, you're going to determine what your goals are, what your success is, because as long as you're staying true to what those little, like you said, those little promises you make to yourself, like your success should be based on how you're following up with your little promises. And to me, if you're following your soul and you're listening to your promises and you're adjusting, and maybe you change your benchmarks, because to me, it's you're in your present. So you can have a barometer of, yeah, this feels good, I'm in my joy, or no, this doesn't feel good, I feel like I'm fighting, I feel like I'm forcing it. How do you regulate that success based on what you're getting from the outside versus how you're feeling inside? Or do they just go together? Like when you're feeling great inside, the outside just brings that in, because you said your listeners were low self-worth in the beginning. Have you seen that your listeners have changed as your self-worth has gone up? Or, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, once you're able to calibrate your self-worth and it's more realistic, does that also go with the flow of you being happier or feeling fulfillment?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. But I think to your point earlier, it is kind of a moving target, right? Where it's weird. Somebody asked me this recently. They said, well, I don't want to connect my self-worth to my work. And I don't want it to be, if I'm not productive, I don't get self-worth. And I said, I totally agree. Unless you're somebody who has overly high self-worth, because you need to make it more accurate. Just like if you have very low self-worth, the last thing I ever want you to do is say, oh, I only did blank today, I don't deserve to feel worthy. I think it's the opposite. I think you need to focus on your wins. So I just think of it from a place of, I am the most quote unquote successful I've ever been, just in terms of impact in terms of mastery and in terms of profitability. I'm the most successful, quote unquote, I've ever been, but my life is also the most challenging it's ever been. And I mean, I am busier. I am positively overwhelmed more than I've ever been. I think that helps me be proud of what I'm doing. For me, Julie, I think that the self-worth comes from, I have a lot of proof that I'm doing good in the world. Love that. I'm very proud of what I'm doing. I'm very fulfilled. Every day I'm fulfilled with what I get to do. I'm unreasonably clear on what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I realize that's a privilege that not a lot of people have. My self-worth is connected to my work, but not in a negative way where if this interview goes bad, I'm going to say, oh my goodness, I'm not worthy. I suck. I'm terrible. That won't happen. What will happen is I will say, wow, I've done 1,500 interviews or whatever it is, 1,500 episodes. This is a great opportunity for me to get a little bit better. So yeah, I think it's hard. It's hard. For me, the thing that helps my self-worth the most is standing up for myself. That's the thing that helps my self-worth more than anything. It's setting boundaries and maintaining the boundaries. So this is a good example. I do a lot of interviews, and my rule is this. If I show up for an interview and the person interviewing me is 5 minutes late or more, I leave. So if I'm in the room for 5 minutes and the person doesn't show up, I leave. I just send them a message that says, hey, I waited for 5 minutes. Unfortunately, I have to go on to my next thing because I can't wait around in case you don't show up. I'm happy to reschedule if that's aligned. Just let me know. I did that a couple weeks ago. And this person texted me. And I almost reverted to low self-worth Kevin and said, hey, I'm so sorry. I hurt your feelings. I'm so sorry that I had to leave. Yes, I'm sorry, but I can't revert back to your time is more important than my time. And I don't want you to look down on me. I don't want you to be mad at me, because if I do, I'm subconsciously lowering my own self-worth. I'm lowering my own value to make sure that we don't argue. And I caught myself doing that. And I just sent the message of, yeah, unfortunately, that's just the rule. If I have to wait for 5 minutes, I just go on to my next thing because I'm busy. There's a lot going on. And what I've seen statistically is if somebody's 5 minutes late, they're not coming, especially to a 30-minute meeting. I mean, your 5 minutes of 30 minutes is a lot. So that's been the biggest thing for me, is understanding that when my self-belief increases, I get more opportunities. Those opportunities are tests for me to level up my self-worth. And that's probably the best way to put it. To your point, it's a moving target, and it gets a little bit harder every day. It gets a little bit harder as the stakes get higher to lean into the self-worth.
Because you're ascending and you're constantly questioning. You're constantly saying, is this where I want to be? And that's a beautiful thing, but it makes you vulnerable, because you're always willing to look at that soft spot, that little, that's uncomfortable, but you're looking at it and you're like, well, should I go back? And you're like, no, because you're worth it. And that's such a great message. Oh my gosh, Kevin, that's a great message, because it's like, if you just know yourself, know what's important to you, punctuality is important. So you set your standard, right? In my book, my last chapter, I had boundary. I changed it. I made it.
Yeah.
I didn't make it boundaries. I said your expectations. Like it doesn't, it's what you're willing to accept. So, and just to be clear on that.
Yeah. Yeah. But even to your point, the other side of that though, and this is where things can get wonky, Julie, as a podcaster and a podcast coach, I can charge a different price than somebody who just started their podcast and just started podcast coaching. Now, this is where things get wonky. Just because you're charging a certain amount of money does not mean that's what your quote unquote worth is. That's where things get weird. I went to an event one time, and the people there said, I'm going to help everybody make more money today. When you leave here, I want you to add a 0 to your pricing for your coaching. And I was thinking to myself, wait, what? Like, what do you mean add a 0 to my pricing? So if I charge $150 an hour, I'm going to charge $1,500 an hour? That doesn't make any sense. And there was a young lady there who just started coaching. And I took her outside and I said, look, I know you just started coaching. I know what you heard probably seems like it's the way to go and you're going to make a boatload of money. Don't do that. Do not do that. I guarantee it's going to crash and burn. I talked to her a year later and she had no clients. She didn't get any clients and she had to go get another job because this is what happens. Your intrinsic value tells you, well, I am more valuable than $100 an hour or whatever it is. I'm more valuable than these other coaches. That doesn't mean you can charge more. So that's the interesting piece is if your self-worth is too high, you try to bring that into reality, you don't get the results you want, that actually hurts your self-worth. Then your self-worth is going to tank because you're not getting the results that you want, or you have to delude yourself into even higher self-worth and say, well, it just wasn't meant to be, or maybe that wasn't supposed to happen that way. When in reality, the truth is maybe you charge too much. So there's a lot of layers to this that are super contextual. They're very personal to each person's experience. But that's why self-awareness is so important, is because only you really know how you feel about yourself, and only you really know the truth about yourself. And that's why it's so hard.
And then if your self-worth is out of whack, then you're trying to be somebody you're not too. And it's just that authenticity, just to be real. And that's been a huge thing, and if you can just say exactly your position, like maybe you're in a situation, you're like, this is awkward, I don't know what to say. And then all of a sudden everyone can just laugh, but if you don't, and you just stay in this pretense of being okay, that everything's fine, like nobody wants to go through life pretending that everything's fine, because we're all trying to figure the heck out. We're just trying to make our way, right? We're in this 3D world that we got to make money and we got to survive, but then also our spirits want to soar. So we have to, it's like a balance beam or a seesaw sometimes, you got to come in and out. And, to me, the biggest sign that I could think of and I never thought about it through this lens before, but like if you're fearful, if you're anxious, if you're competing, you're probably in this idea of too much self-worth, because that's ego, right? The ego, when signs of ego are, imbalance and, just that unrest and nothing's good and you're not good enough and your ego wants to protect you, but in actuality it can make you seem phony or hold you back. If listeners are wondering how else could I know too much self-worth, which it's like, as long as you can keep checking in and questioning and try to be present in the moment and just tune into your heart. How does it feel? Like, what's going on inside of you? Is your stomach turning? Like, I remember I had this job where I felt like people were always like micromanaging me. And every day I went to work and my stomach hurt. And I just pushed through because I was young and it was my first job and insecurity. And, the minute I quit that job, I just felt a relief. It's like your body will tell you. Your body will tell you, right?
Yeah, I know those feelings. Yeah. I think the high self-worth can be entitlement. That's a good way to think of it, is, do you believe you're entitled to results you haven't showed up for yet? And again, that's a fine line, because there's a lot of the side of spirituality that says, well, I do deserve this and this and this. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But if you think about when you meet somebody who's entitled, what is it? They believe that they deserve things that they really don't. And there's the delta between what they believe that they deserve and what they're actually going to get, because they don't necessarily believe it yet. Where I think the other side of low self-worth is probably self-deprecation, where I don't deserve anything because I'm the worst, I'm terrible. Those are the poles of this. So that's an important thing. And I've really started to, when I meet people and I sense entitlement, I check in with this. And then I just start looking and feeling and just being present and saying, okay, let me check the words that they use. Let me listen to the the examples, the stories. And from what I've seen, usually entitlement comes from very, very high over self-worth. So that's another way to check in. Like, am I entitled? Do I feel that Julie should roll out the red carpet for me because I'm a podcaster who has more episodes? No, because I know at one point I was where Julie was, right? So it's like, it's important to stay humble in that as well.
I love that because I was just thinking the fulcrum, like, because you can go high or low. The fulcrum, the middle point is your gratitude. Because if you appreciate all the gifts you have, you don't necessarily expect that you're entitled for more because you have so much already. And then if you're in deficit, you don't think you deserve it. That's because you're not appreciating the gifts that are right in front of you. Grounding, grounding is huge for this because you have to be aware of where you are, like your whole consciousness thing. And so it's like, it's a powerful thing to just be where you are and say, okay, this is what, like you said, what's going right. What's going right, and celebrate that day. Because, well, I mean, I think in our culture, we just take life for granted. Like, we take for granted we're going to wake up in the morning. You know, like every day is a gift. And we do. We think that's that important. We're invincible because we have modern medicine or there, you know, and every once in a while we get thrown a curveball of cancer or some kind of diagnosis. But I mean, we really do. Yeah. The Western world, we take advantage. We take for granted that we're going to have that breath coming to us in the morning. And even if we just woke up and said, gosh, I'm really happy to be here today. And just start with that, you know, and your goals, your ambition will take over because you're grateful for what opportunities you have. I love that message. And, you know, that the whole thing about knowing yourself, and if you feel entitlement, that might be because you're taking for granted the things that you've been given. I've noticed that with many people that you're like, well, you have so much. Why are you so greedy? Like, there's abundance. We don't need to hoard. You don't need to be the superstar every time. Sometimes you're just there to be the supporting person and learn. It takes vulnerability. And, you know, like you said, sometimes it doesn't go the way you think it should, but there's a lesson. There's gifts.
Perspective. Always. There's always a lesson. Always. It's just whether or not you're ready to learn it, or whether or not you're willing to learn it, or whether or not you're capable of learning it. You know, there's one of the things I say all the time is I do believe I'm a strong communicator and a strong speaker and a strong podcaster. The only reason is because I've made so many mistakes. That's the only reason why I believe that, because through every episode we've ever done, I've made some sort of mistake that I could have done better. And I don't beat myself up over that. It's more, okay, next time I'll try to make sure I don't do that. And then I'll grow a little, and I'll grow a little, and I'll grow a little. But it really is. It's how often can you show up, and then how do you take the quote unquote failures? Most people, Julie, they don't fail. They quit. They quit long before they would have ever failed. It's just a matter of make sure you show up, and that's the important part, right? You have to check in with your self-belief and your self-worth, because that's going to dictate your experience, and that's going to dictate your results, and that's going to dictate your resilience, and it's going to dictate the approach. So understanding yourself at the deepest level is one of the best ways to, I won't say ensure success, because I don't think anything can ensure success, but it's one of the best ways to make sure that you are living a life that is as aligned as it can be for you. And I think that's success at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And it makes it easy to switch gears. Like, it didn't go your way, then just make a different choice. You know, like I think we try to make it so complicated sometimes. Like, no, that didn't go, just, you know, like you said, learn, move on. You didn't like the way you scolded your son, then tell him you're sorry and just do it a different way. You know, it's and you know, that admitting that you made a mistake is such a huge thing, because everyone's like, oh, I have to be this perfect, you know, these people. And I do love, there seems to be more of a trend of people messing up on social media and sharing it. And I love that. It's not all about being perfect anymore. It's like, I think the things with more views are the mess ups. And then you have these people making big mistakes. Yeah. It's like, okay, let's find the fulcrum. You got to find the middle here, people.
We like reality.
We do.
Real, though, like actual reality, not manufactured reality. Those are two different things. Actual reality is ugly. And sometimes there's mistakes, but there's also celebration. Manufactured reality has become perfection all the time. And that's just not, it's just manufactured. It's not real. That's not what reality is for 99.999999999% of people.
I just really, really have enjoyed connecting with you on this. And I think there's a lot of tidbits. I can't wait to go over, and I'll do like highlights of my favorite quotes. And I'm just really excited to share and let people re-listen to this, because there's so many nuggets. There's so many nuggets. And I just appreciate your journey and you sharing it with us. It was a gift. Anything else you wanted to share, or anything else you have on your heart?
One of my favorite quotes: your reality becomes the parts of your imagination that you hold onto and pour into the longest. In 5-10 years, you're going to end up somewhere, and hopefully it's where the positive parts of your imagination took you, not the negative, scarce, fearful parts. So yeah, understand that your life is going to change. Change is inevitable. It's scary, but it's required. So make sure you're at least changing in the direction at the speed in alignment with what you want.
Do yourself the favor of figuring out what you really do want, because I think we go through with this, there's so much coming at us that we will think that external things are what we want, or, there's nothing wrong with a nice car and a nice house and cozy clothes, but, really get down to what lights you up, what brings you joy. And it's different for you. So you have to do the work to find that. And that's gold mining. We talked about nuggets, but that's your gold mine is getting quiet and finding your own, and then sharing that, because it'll light me up just hearing about your story. And like, that's what we're all about. We're all about helping each other light up, and you can't put a price on it. There's no brand for it. It's the GUI of life.
I like that. The GUI. I like that.
The GUI. I just fell in love with podcasting because this is just a special thing, and I'm honored to share it, and honored that you've spent your time with me today.
My pleasure. Truly my pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. I love the depth of the conversation, and any opportunity I can to be a part of the mission, I am more than happy.
Well, thank you. And I'll put a link to your podcast in the show notes. And I'm sure everyone's going to want to check out more of Kevin Palmieri. I do appreciate it. And everyone have a very wonderful day, and go out and make, every moment's a chance to create the life of your dreams. So go get it. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to the next episode. As always, you can reach me at www.youneedapeptalk.com, and enjoy each day, as each moment is a chance to live the life of your dreams. Take care.